Sonic Advance was a great continuation for the formula previously set by the Genesis classics. It built off of what had been developed before and added onto it with new ideas that, for the most part, worked tremendously. Clearly, as it sold 1.21 million copies in the United States alone. With success that big, you obviously develop a sequel that's bigger and better than the original in every way, right? Well... On December 19th, 2002, just one day short of a year after the first, Sonic Advance 2 hit store shelves. DIMPS was back again, collaborating with Sonic Team to develop the sequel. The team began the conceptual phase immediately after the release of the first and began development in February 2002, meaning the game was created in just 8 months. The goal of the team was to make a sequel that was not only larger, but faster paced than the first. They even increased the size of the levels by 6 times. As for me, I first got Sonic Advance 2 as a Christmas present in 2002 and remembered loving it. However, as the years have passed, my opinion on it has lessened more and more with each playthrough. Over 20 years after its initial release, it's time to find out where I stand with it. This is Sonic Advance 2.
Sonic Advance 2!
An immediate difference one will notice upon booting up the game is that Sonic is the only playable character in the beginning. The other characters will have to be unlocked somehow. Amy also appears to be missing, replaced with a new character yet unknown. With only one option, let's start the game with Sonic.
3, 2, 1, go!
Leaf Forest is our opening stage, and what a way to start the game off. Rather than taking control of Sonic immediately, he does a wind-up animation as the narrator counts us down. With a loud GO! Sonic is off at speeds unlike the previous adventure. You'll come to grips with Sonic's controls here. It's immediately apparent that Sonic Advance 2 is a much different experience than before. If the first Advance was a proper Genesis sequel, then Advance 2 is an action platformer. Taking huge inspiration from the adventure games, you'll blaze through levels at a much faster pace. Sonic still retains his abilities from before, such as jumping and spin dashing. However, the spin dash isn't quite as useful at gaining speed as before. Then how are you supposed to gain speed? Well, if the player runs for a long enough time without getting interrupted, you'll be greeted by this. Sonic Advance 2 is all about building up breakneck speeds. Sonic runs faster than ever before. The game wants you to feel this speed, as Sonic will often outrun the screen at top speed. Sonic even has an afterimage to give the player a visual cue of just how fast you're going. With speeds this fast, you'll want to take advantage of the game's other core feature, tricks. By pressing the R button while in the air, Sonic will perform a trick. It's fast, snappy, and keeps the momentum going. Depending on which direction you're holding, the trick will differ. If you hold up, Sonic will do a high jump. It's helpful for making a platform that's just barely out of reach. By holding backwards, Sonic will do a backflip. Very helpful if you've made a mistake and sent yourself towards a trap. The most useful of the tricks is the forward dash. By holding forward and doing a trick, Sonic will do a spin kick that carries his momentum forward. It can collide with enemies and damage them, as well as keeping his speed going. It's here that you'll come to grips with a returning element, rail grinding. In Advance 1, only Sonic and Amy could grind on rails, and it had to be pixel perfect in order to execute the action, on top of being much slower. However, in Advance 2, the starting area of the rail is a lot easier to touch, and rails play a much greater part in the core gameplay. You'll do much more rail grinding than before, as the level design is built on the foundation of utilizing them to carry your momentum. Speed is the nature of the game. With all of these additions and the return of the air dash, Sonic will blitz through levels with style and spectacle. Leaf Forest is a great first level. It teaches you everything you need to know about the new gameplay features while simultaneously bringing back returning elements, such as springs and loops. With the addition of ramps to launch yourself into tricks, plenty of rails, and the only underwater area that you can run over at the top speed, it makes for a very strong first impression. Another deviation is the way the level ends. Before, it was just as the classics were. In Act 1, you'd spin a sign, and in Act 2, you beat a boss and open an animal capsule. However, in Advance 2, your speed and twitchy reflexes are key to getting a higher point total. Sonic crosses a finish line, and depending on how fast you pull back on the D-pad, Sonic will skid to a stop. There are 3 colored areas. You can score 800, 300, and 100 points respectively depending on how fast you're able to stop. This applies to both acts, which leads to the bosses. Bosses are now given their own individual acts, and unlike before, these bosses are all fought in an auto-runner style. You're always moving with a single goal, Hit Eggman enough times to bring him down. The first boss is rather similar to the one from the first Advance game. Eggman has a giant hammer that he will swing down to stop you from closing in on him. You'll have to time your movements just right in order to close the gap between yourself and the Mad Doctor. With enough hits, Eggman flees, and a new face clings on to Sonic. Meet Cream the Rabbit, a 6-year-old girl with a pet chow named Cheese. A brief cutscene will play and Cream's personality is on full display. She's a soft-spoken girl with manners, properly thanking Sonic for saving her, even referring to Sonic as Mr. Sonic. Sonic warns her to stay safe before taking off to the next zone. Cream mentions needing to save her mother, who we can assume was kidnapped by Eggman before being met with the message that we can now play as Cream herself.
3, 2, 1, go!
Hot Crater is our next stage and by far my favorite. A boiling cavern filled with lava, pulley hooks, and a ton of springs to bounce the player forward. Cream is a fun addition to the playable cast. She, like Tails, is able to fly in the air. However, unlike Tails, her flight time is nowhere near as long. She also has an additional attack. By pressing the B button, she'll send Cheese after the nearest enemy. This attack is busted, and we'll get into why that is later on. Cream is one of my favorite additions to the main cast. She's fun to play as, and she's downright adorable. Eggman's rocking a tank this time around with a cannon that moves up and down slowly before firing a cannonball. You'll have to maintain your speed while also anticipating where the cannonball will go when it's fired. It's still a relatively easy boss. Moving on.
Three, 2, 1, go!
By far the most unique act in the game, and so far in the Advance series, we have Music Plant, a zone entirely composed of various instruments. You'll bounce along pianos, jump across xylophones, and blast through various horns. The instruments also make noise as you move across them. It's bright and colorful and a fun time all around. There are a few dickish enemy placements, but it's nothing you can't learn from. Eggman utilizes a tower with 3 spiked wheels that he sends out at random. They'll shoot a projectile your way before giving you an opening so that you can use them as stepping stones in order to reach Eggman's cockpit. He'll eventually make the wheels move up and down in order to trick you. After his defeat, you'll rescue Tails. Tails warns Sonic that Eggman must be planning something before the hot-headed hedgehog runs off. Tails makes an attempt to stop Sonic before a message pops up that you can now play as him.
Three, 2, 1, go!
Ice Paradise is next, and this is where I begin to have issues with the level design. The last 3 zones have had the occasional bad enemy placement, hazard traps, and bottomless pits to throw you off, but they were few and far between. Ice Paradise cranks things up with plenty of do-or-die situations. Being an ice zone, you'll have plenty of slopes to slide down that'll require you to make quick reactions in order to jump to the next platform. Failing to do so will cause you to plummet below, more often than not to your own demise. That's not even the worst part. There are these machines that will spit you out from the top or the bottom depending on how fast you went into them. Sometimes the bottom route sends you to your death, an unforeseeable death that you cannot predict. There are also these spinning bars that require you to jump at the right angle to reach platforms that are above you. These have been present since the beginning of the game, but they were always over safe ground. Here, however, you'll have to make sure you jump just right or be sent to your doom. The boss isn't much better. Eggman is just barely out of your reach. He'll fire explosive missiles down at the ground that you'll have to jump over, or otherwise, you'll be hit by a bunch of explosions that can send your rings flying off screen. The tail has a small disc you'll have to time your jumping on just right in order to bounce yourself up to reach him. The timing can be tricky to get right, so don't be surprised if you wind up in a bad loop of getting hit and not being able to bounce up to Eggman. It happens all the time. Somehow, if you can believe it, it gets worse.
Three, 2, 1, go!
What is it with the Advance games having the Sky-themed zones be the worst one in the game? Sky Canyon is by far the worst level in the game. As a kid, I couldn't beat this one, for one reason alone. This is the first zone in which the trick system is required to progress. As a child, I never read the manuals. I only ever looked at the pictures inside of them, so I had no idea there were these tricks you could perform. I somehow never thought to press the R button either. Even as an adult, this zone is ridiculous. The amount of bottomless pits is insane. The first few seconds of both acts have these traps that will send you into pits if you aren't careful. There's also plenty of bad enemy placements that will catch you off guard at high speed, including a crushing block that, despite always knowing it's there, I managed to get crushed by every single time. There are pinwheels that can send you down below if you don't act fast when they send you upwards. And there's these annoying platforms that you bounce off of, and they can cause your controls to become so loose, it's easy to overshoot your jumps and fall below. But you want to know what the worst part of this entire experience is? Do you really want to know? The boss. Oh my god! This boss is the worst part of the game by far. For reasons I can only assume are his own stupidity, Knuckles is the boss, piloting Eggman's most annoying contraption. A giant spinning wheel with a laser that you need to hit a few times to destroy. The cockpit can only be damaged at the very top, so you have to hit him just right to even damage him as he's coming into your area of attack. But good luck even getting close to him, let alone hitting him, because someone at DIMPS decided it would be a brilliant idea to have a swinging hand that can one-hit kill you, even when you're holding rings. You can't even damage the hand itself. Its attack pattern is so random, I'd often be too scared to even get near Knuckles because I'd fear of being instantly killed. So it's a constant fear struggle of trying to get close to him without dying. And just to rub salt in the wound, if you die enough times and get a game over in a boss fight, you get sent back all the way to Act 1. This is why I never made it past this zone as a child. Even if I somehow made it through both acts, the boss would be the run finisher. Somehow, after defeating him and leaving Knuckles an angry, dirty mess, Sonic rightfully chews him out for being gullible enough to fall for one of Eggman's schemes again before ditching the hot head to pursue Eggman. Knuckles doesn't take this too well, and you eventually unlock him to be played as.
3, 2, 1, go!
Techno Base is another unique zone as it takes place entirely within a computer program. Knuckles still has his gliding and punching from Advance 1, but you won't find climbing up walls or gliding all that useful due to the game's focus on high-speed action. Knuckles also has the worst tricks by far. His forward one kills all his momentum as soon as he touches the ground, and his upward one stops all forward momentum once he shoots himself up. I hate to say it, but Knuckles has become the worst playable character in this game. Techno Base is guilty of the same issues as Sky Canyon, but to a much lesser extent. There are these cube platforms that will send you forward and sometimes lead you into a trap. And there are rails that can also send you into other rails, but if you don't switch rails soon enough, you'll be going down to your doom. It also doesn't help that playing the zone on anything bigger than a GBA screen is an eyesore. The bright flashing colors on a dark backdrop do not help my already poor eyesight and give me major headaches. The boss is just as frustrating as the previous. Eggman has 4 platforms rotating around him. Each can be set off with traps to stop you from using them as platforms. 2 can cause spikes to shoot up from the floor in order to damage you, and the other 2 can be spun really fast so that you can't stand on them. You'll need to use these platforms if you want to even get a chance to strike Eggman's cockpit in the center. All the while, he'll shoot these 3 projectiles at you, which can already be hard enough to see thanks to the background, but really hard to dodge when you're constantly moving. These running bosses are starting to become such a nuisance. Only one main zone remains, Egg-Utopia.
Three, 2, 1, go!
You know the drill already. It's your typical space zone. Anti-gravity returns, except now you're expected to rail grind upside down too, somehow. There are these carts that can launch you forward and downward really fast, poles that you'll spin down and have to time your jumps to transfer yourself through. It's not as difficult as the last 2 zones, so it feels more like a victory lap if anything. But I will say, the music is really good, capturing that foreboding feeling of approaching the end. Once again, Yutaka Minobe and Tatsuyuki Maeda return, now joined by, and I'm gonna butcher this one as well, Teruhiko Nakagawa. to compose some of the best songs in the GBA sound chip has ever put out. I've already mentioned Egg Utopia, but highlights include Hot Crater for having one of the catchiest melodies with an incredible backing beat. Leaf Forest for having a serene feel mixed with an energetic vibe. And for all my issues with it, Sky Canyon for just being an absolute bop. The most interesting boss so far, the Egg Frog as it's called online, utilizes a new gimmick of changing gravity. By double tapping up or down, Sonic will change gravity on a whim. You'll have to be strategic about when you change gravity though, so that you can hit Eggman just right as you're going up or down, while also dodging his massive legs and missiles he likes to shoot at the ground so that they can cause massive shockwaves. The boss is over before you know it, and you're on to the final zone, the XX Zone. Similar to the X Zone from Sonic Advance 1, it is a zone dedicated exclusively to bosses. However, where Advance 1 had 2 callback bosses, Advance 2 is a boss rush of every single boss you've fought up to this point. Granted, they take less hits than before, and thankfully have generous checkpoints in between each fight, but this is a dumb idea I've never been fond of, boss rushes. It's one of my biggest criticisms of Mega Man games. It's just a waste of time and only serves to pad the experience out needlessly. This is, however, a great way to bring up the topic of Cream and her Chow cheese. Remember how I said that cheese would attack the nearest enemy? This applies to bosses as well. If you're playing as Cream, she can make short work of every single boss. They won't even be able to touch you if you just keep spamming B. Listen, I'm just saying, the game has cheated me left and right. Fair is fair! After you've beaten all the rematches, in a strange change of pace, you're met with the only boss in the game that doesn't see you running towards it. This tall mech's only weak point is its head. To hit it, you'll have to utilize these 3 rising platforms to reach it, but you must be careful, as the ceiling has spikes on it, and they can knock your rings from you, and even instantly kill you by crush death sometimes. He'll fire his 2 arms at you, but if you hit them enough times, they'll disappear, leaving the cockpit completely vulnerable. Upon defeat, you'll be met with a normal ending. Sonic & Co. will descend to the planet as Eggman's space station crashes down and explodes. If you're playing as Cream, she'll be reunited with her mother Vanilla, somehow completely safe and not kidnapped. You'll be congratulated and the credits will roll, but you know the drill. This isn't the true ending. In order to get the true ending, you'll have to collect the 7 Chaos Emeralds. How do you do that? In each zone there are special rings scattered. You'll have to search high and low throughout each level, combing each nook and cranny to locate 7 of them and cross the finish line. You also must do this without dying, as you will lose every single one you've collected, even if you've touched a checkpoint. You heard me correctly. You are expected to go against the design of the game and go slow, while exploring these massive levels for special rings and pray you cross the finish line before you get a chance to collect one of the emeralds. And no, you can't just keep doing the first level over and over. Each zone holds 1 emerald. If you somehow make it to one of these special stages, you'll be placed in a big open area with rings everywhere. Your goal is to run around the open field, collecting a set number of rings in a limited time while avoiding Zero the Robot from Sonic Adventure? Okay. If you collect several rings in a row, you'll activate a multiplier to gain even more. There are single rings and red ones worth 5. These special stages are by no means difficult, but the act of getting them is such a pain in the butt that it's a relief they're not that hard. But I'm not done ranting. You can't collect different emeralds as different characters. In Advance 1, your emeralds were shared amongst all 4 characters, meaning you could pick Tails and fly to the special rings to save yourself time and effort. In order to see the true final boss, you must collect all the emeralds as Sonic, and only Sonic. So, what do you even get for collecting the emeralds as the other characters, I hear you ask? Basic features that you already had at the start of Advance 1. If you collect the first set, you'll get the Tiny Chow Garden, which is the exact same as the one from the first game, with the exception being one minigame where Cream and Cheese collect rings. Your second set unlocks the sound test. You know, the ability to listen to the music of the game, something we can do in this day and age on the internet for free. The third set unlocks the time attack mode, a basic feature most Sonic games have unlocked at the start. And the fourth set unlocks Amy? Yes, Amy Rose is playable in Advance 2 as a secret character, and she plays just like everyone else. So they stripped her of the unique playstyle that I liked in Advance 1, meaning that she's not worth it at all. But wait, she also has a set of Chaos Emeralds to collect. What does she get for all the trouble? Nothing. You get nothing. Let's get back on topic before I lose my cool again. After collecting the emeralds as Sonic and only Sonic, and returning to the game, a new zone will unlock on the world map. Cream and her mother Vanilla are out for a walk with the Flickies in Leaf Forest Zone when suddenly an invisible mech swoops in and kidnaps Vanilla before taking off into space. Cream bursts into tears before Sonic and friends arrive too late. Sonic snaps his fingers in frustration before deciding to summon the Chaos Emeralds and turn super, promising Cream the safe return of her mother before taking off after Eggman, initiating the true final battle. True Area 52 is a free flight one-on-one between Super Sonic and Eggman. Your goal is to knock back the homing missiles he fires at you into his cockpit. The fight is challenging, and his attacks are rather difficult to avoid if you don't know what you're doing. He can fire projectiles at you, as well as freeze you with a hard dodge laser, and then vacuum you into his machine and deplete your rings much faster. Your rings are already depleting very fast, by the way. In his second phase, he'll start spinning around the screen and you'll be forced to deflect the missiles backwards. Rings are scarce, so you'll have to be quick in taking him down. So I died and died and died some more before it finally clicked. I used to find this fight insufferable, finding it much like a majority of the game, unfairly difficult. But after trying and trying again, I finally got into the groove of the boss's patterns, and it finally clicked with me. I think this is one of the best Super Sonic fights in the entire series. The game somehow stuck the landing. After enough hits, Eggman's machine goes down. The capsule Vanilla is trapped in begins hurtling itself down to the planet's surface at a rapid pace as Super Sonic does his best to slow its descent. Sonic clearly underestimated the situation as the capsule breaks open, knocking the super form clean out of him and sending him flying. Vanilla, now falling down rapidly, reaches her hand out for Sonic in an attempt to gain his assistance. Sonic reaches for her, trying as hard as he can to close the distance between the two of them before he catches her. Sonic manages to land safely in a situation where his kneecaps should definitely be broken, reuniting Cream with her mother and rejoining his friends. One final farewell to everyone, Sonic runs off into the sunset, ending Sonic Advance 2.
Congratulations!
Sonic Advance 2 is a flawed mess of a game. I used to love it so much as a kid. It was my favorite Advance title, but as I got older, it became my least favorite. The level design is full of traps to catch the player off guard in ways they'd never be able to react to, At the speeds the game expects you to reach, there are too many bottomless pits to kill you without notice. The bosses are either too easy or too difficult with no fair challenge to them. The Chaos Emerald system is flawed and counterintuitive to the design of the game, with basic features being locked behind recollecting them as other characters. The characters are no longer distinct enough to make each playthrough feel unique. The only thing this game has going for it are a strong first few levels, a killer soundtrack, and a final boss that's a lot of fun when you know what you're doing. That being said, I'd be crazy not to mention Sonic Advance 2 SP. This is a wonderful mod created by the talented Tracker TD that addresses many of this game's issues. The level design is adjusted to not have as many bottomless pits, outright adding new routes entirely, fixing enemy placements to not be terrible, adding more special rings to each zone, and bringing down the required amount from 7 to 5. It's a wonderful mod that I highly recommend checking out. It definitely improves the game as a whole, but I'm not talking about the mod. I'm talking about the game as it was released, and with that, these problems hold it back. I'm not sure if DIMPS was aware of these issues or not, but they clearly listened to most of them, as the final game of this trilogy would address almost every single issue I had with this game and improve on it by blending the best elements of both titles together. Next time, we'll be taking a look at what I consider to be the best of the Advance trilogy, Sonic Advance 3.